All right, this is The Earth and Its Peoples by Richard Bulliet, Chapter 33, Section 2, The Question of Values. This section looks a little bit at the conflict between different cultural beliefs around the world, or kind of maybe the clash of various cultural beliefs. It sort of puts the religious beliefs against secular, local versus international, and tradition against, either visionary or kind of progressive. You can think of tradition and visionary as like those who favor tradition versus those who favor change. And some of this has caused, conflicts. In regards to religion, religion has played in some areas a more important role in politics. So, for example, evangelical Americans helped elect George W. Bush in 2000 and 2004. A big part of his constituency were those who were deeply involved in religion. Pope John Paul II, very popular pope, really helped to revitalize, you might say, Catholicism. But maybe the most clear example of this is the resurgence of Islam. The Iranian Revolution in 1979 is one example. The fighters in Afghanistan are another example of this. And the influence on terrorism in particular has, really kind of dominated the mainstream media. Terrorism, is the tactic to employ various violent acts like bombings and assassinations in order to achieve some sort of political goal. And terrorism has become maybe not more widespread, certainly in some areas, but certainly more visible, right? So terror tactics, we might say terror, which really is designed to instill fear on populations. We'll say about the media, terrorism is more visible and therefore in some ways more effective. Again, in spreading, terror, spreading fear into those populations. Terrorism is a tactic that's used typically by weaker groups against stronger groups. And while it's been used in multiple occasions in multiple areas, it's been predominantly Islamic terrorism that has dominated the mainstream headlines, certainly since 2000. The best example here is Osama bin Laden, who we know as the leader of Al-Qaeda. The international terrorist organization responsible for the 9/11 attacks. Bin Laden calling for a holy war or jihad against the United States and its allies. Of course, we have Al-Qaeda here. And while the September 11th attacks of 2001 are the most visible, 2001, there certainly have been other attacks inspired. American embassies were bombed or blown up in the 1990s. The USS Cole, an American battleship, was bombed in the year 2000. Additionally, there have been terror attacks in places like London, Madrid, Spain, places India, Mumbai, Indonesia, really in all sorts of places around the world, which of course have prompted the United States to declare GWOT, or the Global War on Terrorism, as a tactic. We can see here real quick, when we just jump to religious beliefs, we're going to take a quick look at the map here to show you how the world is divided along cultural lines. The red representing the predominantly Christian populations, North America, South America, Europe, Russia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Australia. The green representing predominantly Islamic areas, Northern Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, Turkey, the Middle East, and in some cases Central Asia. Purple representing primarily Hindu populations you can find in India. I might also note that Islamic populations are also found in Indonesia, Southeast Asia. Don't forget about that area there. The orange representing primarily Buddhists, And then China, which is technically unaffiliated because the Chinese Communist Party doesn't recognize any particular religion, but you have very strong Confucian ideology. Confucianism is not technically a religion, but still maybe some Buddhist teachings in that area there. So religion continues to play an important role in politics, and often kind of clashing with various other maybe secular values. There's also been an effort to try and draw more attention to universal rights. The Universal Nations declare the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which for the most part is based on the U.S. Bill of Rights. One good example is the idea of crimes against humanity, that there are certain things that are, that supersede national borders and can be considered crimes against all human beings. Additionally, NGOs, or non-governmental organizations, have worked to try and alleviate suffering around the world, not associated with any particular country, but kind of looking over overall humanity. Amnesty International works to really break, I don't know if this is technically sound, but break people out of prison, essentially. Jails who have been unjustly done so, and Doctors Without Borders provide medical care to people all around the world. Additionally, women's rights has also been championed by the United Nations. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women has been championed by the United Nations. Again, recall the United Nations is an international organization. But in some of these areas, and this is evident in the case of women's rights, that sometimes secular and religious or traditional and visionary or progressive ideas clash. So for example, on the issue of women's rights, there's been maybe some disagreement, in particular on women's clothing when it comes to Western views of women's clothing, the hijab, for example, whether or not, according to Western women's rights advocates, that is a garment of oppression or a garment of patriarchy, whereas some Islamic women believe that it's more a garment of empowerment, religiosity. And so, even in the area of women's rights, you can see how some of the cultures of different people around the world don't always see eye to eye.